Welcome to Night Drive Paranormal. This is the show where I bring you real life accounts of the paranormal that have been sent to me from listeners of my main show, the Tape Library. Whatever you choose to believe, the people who wrote these stories all claim that they experienced something unexplainable. So get yourself comfortable and let's take another late night drive together. Don't touch that dial and let's get into our first story. When I was 10 years old, my mum and stepdad decided to move away from the cramped apartment my mum had been renting since her divorce from my dad and move into a large rental home. We lived in a rural area in southeast Virginia where, although there were no major battles, there were some skirmishes and encampments during the Civil War. The home dated back to that era and was across the street from a dilapidated house that served as a temporary headquarters for a Confederate general, as he and his troops stayed there before moving on to fight elsewhere. The layout of the house consisted of 4 large rooms downstairs, each with a fireplace that had long been sealed up, and a kitchen dining room that had been added on after the original house was built. Upstairs were 2 small bedrooms, one at each end of the hallway, with a bathroom in between them, and a large room on the opposite side of the hallway. One of the small bedrooms was for me and my stepsister. The other was for my brother and stepbrother. My step-siblings stayed overnight only once a month, so it was mostly just my brother and myself who used them. The large room was turned into a playroom, since there was no space for our toys in the bedrooms themselves. From the day we moved in until the day we moved out, I had horrible nightmares nearly every night. I became afraid to go to sleep, and would say a little prayer every night, begging not to have a nightmare. One night I woke up and saw what appeared to be smoke on the other side of the room. As I stared at it, the form of a tall man, wearing clothes that looked like they were from the late 1800s or early 1900s, appeared. I was too terrified to scream or get out of bed. I eventually pulled the blankets over my head and eventually fell back asleep. After that, 2 other figures began appearing in my room. One was a short, stout man and the other was a woman, both wearing the same period clothes as the first man I saw. I began sleeping so I was facing the wall to avoid seeing them. Then one night I awoke to see not my bedroom wall, but the familiar mist in front of my face. I watched as it took on the form of a hand, poised as if it was about to cover my mouth. This time I screamed, waking my mother, who immediately came upstairs. I hadn't told her, nor anyone else, about what had been happening in my room, so I said I'd just had a nightmare. The apparitions ended up being the least terrifying experience. One day, while I was in the playroom by myself, I was standing at the windows that looked out over the front yard and its surrounding hedges. I reached up to adjust the blinds and felt a push on my upper back. Instinctively, I put my left hand out to stop my fall and hit a window pane that had a crack in it. I quickly turned around thinking my brother had come upstairs and was playing a joke on me, but I saw no one. I looked down at the floor and saw a red puddle forming, drops quickly expanding its size. I realised the drops were coming from my wrist and turned my arm to see a gaping wound, bleeding profusely. The window pane was broken and a shard of glass had cut my wrist open. I went to the top of the stairs in shock and called out for my mum. After that was a blur as she and my grandmother, who was visiting, rushed me to the ER, where I received several stitches to close the wound. Thankfully the glass missed the major vein in my wrist, but just barely. I found out my brother had been downstairs the entire time, so there was no way he could have pushed me. Almost 50 years later, I still have the scar to remind me of that day. Soon after moving in, my mum and stepdad brought a plot of land and began building a home. We moved out of the rental house 2 years after moving in. To this day, when I go home to visit family, I avoid even driving past that house. It still has a darkness about it, and I often wonder if any subsequent residents have been victims of it. Let's jump straight into our next story, shall we? I currently work at a bar, the same one where these two small events took place. Before the encounter that took place that convinced me the place was haunted to an extent, I would only ever hear small stories from my co-workers, or hear that, yeah, the place is totally haunted. Now, I myself believed in the paranormal for years now, and I find the subject fascinating, but because I haven't experienced anything, I was skeptical that the bar I was working in was actually haunted. But 3 events would change my mind about that, each one a different medium: physical, audio, and visual evidence. For the physical, it was my first encounter. I was on the end of the line setting up plates for the food I was making, and my partner was at one end of the food prep tables on the other side of the kitchen. At the very end of the line, and about 3 feet behind my partner, is a microwave we use to heat up dip and the like, before putting it in the oven. On top of the microwave that day was an ice scoop that one of us had left there. As both of us worked on each of our tasks, we both heard a loud clatter as the scoop shot off the top of the microwave and slammed into our metal pizza oven. Both of us looked to where the noise came from and stared, as both of us hadn't touched it. We looked to one another, silently confirming it. What was worse is I had caught sight of it moving out of the corner of my eye, and my partner hadn't moved in the slightest when it happened. At that moment I knew there had to be something here, as ice scoops tend not to move on their own, I find. My second encounter was what fully convinced me the place was haunted. I was in the dish pit scrubbing plates and setting them into the machine to clean properly. This was during the time of the pandemic, and I was the only cook and dishwasher on the night crew at this point. As such, I had my phone connected to a speaker, so I could listen to my podcasts and music as I pleased. I had the speaker set up on the machine so I could listen as I cleaned the mountain of used dishes. And that night I was listening to a podcast called Haunted Road, a podcast that discussed ghosts and haunted locations. As I was cleaning, I felt my phone clip to my waist move, and I stopped what I was doing to check it, thinking I got a text from the motion. I didn't, but I mentally chalked it up to me getting a phantom text. One of those things where you're sure you felt your phone vibrate, but it did no such thing. Then only a moment later, I hear a plate clatter behind me. The plates were set up on a metal table directly behind me, and when I turned around to look, I saw one had slid down and caused the clatter. Again, I didn't think paranormal, but rather that I had somehow destabilized the pile and caused one to clatter down. I merely shrugged after staring for a moment and went back to my job. Then suddenly, I heard a deep male sigh directly behind me. It sounded rather frustrated, and that is when I reacted. My blood ran cold for a moment, and I felt every hair on the back of my neck stand on end as I whipped around with a polite, "Excuse me?" As I knew, not a single soul was behind me, nor in the kitchen at all, as I wildly looked around to be sure. My body knew that it was impossible for someone to be there, as it hadn't detected anyone else earlier, hence the reaction of my blood and hair. Not a single server was back there with me, and I paused my podcast and checked every nook and cranny of the kitchen. No one. I suspect that whatever entity was there was less than pleased by my choice in podcast, and didn't like to be reminded that he was dead and a ghost. I openly apologised for it, if that was the case, and I haven't heard anything from him again so far. But I do have one more small encounter, the visual sighting of him. At the bar we often host small parties that we will set up food for. One day I'm setting up hotel pans upstairs and getting ready for such a party. The energy up there was electric, and I had a theory that the ghost would retreat up to the more quiet upstairs when the bar was filling up below to have privacy. It was the same feeling of being watched that I would get from time to time. As I placed down a hotel pan with its metal lid covering, I saw my own reflection in the metal, and then, from right to left, a tall black shadow walked directly behind me. I felt that same blood chill as I froze for a moment, and again turned to see nothing. I knew he was up there with me, so I decided to communicate by telling him that there's a party that will be up here in a bit. Sorry for coming into your space, but I'm here just for that. After that, I went back downstairs and continued on with my day. Aside from those 3 encounters, I haven't experienced much, apart from maybe the odd thing falling off a shelf that shouldn't have. But then again, I haven't tried to instigate communication or do a full investigation, but I would like to one night. To try and talk to whomever I work with. Find out who he was, or if there are any more spirits here than just him. If I do encounter anything else or successfully contact a spirit, I will most certainly share. Do you have a paranormal story you would like to be read out on Night Drive Paranormal? Then you can drop me an email at thetapelibrary@protonmail.com. Please include as much detail as you can and what name you would like to be credited as. Okay, let's get into our next submission. The year was 2023. Me and my boyfriend had recently moved into a rented apartment on the first floor. I have no clue who previously lived there. It was just the 2 of us and our 2 cats. My boyfriend was a big League of Legends player at the time, so he would often stay up late, either playing the game on PC or watching YouTube, while I would mostly be on my phone because I was bored. Now, a little about our place. As you enter into the apartment, on your right is a closet. On your left is a wall. If you follow the wall, you'll be led straight to our bedroom. In the corridor opposite the apartment door is the kitchen. Like if you came inside, you would see it right in front of you. There is a wall which separates the kitchen from the living room. So yes, the corridor leads to the living room too. From the bedroom, you can easily see the entire corridor and a small angle of the living room's entrance. Also, the living room and bedroom has one window with bars for protection. The kitchen just has a regular window. We didn't use the lights that much, so when it got dark outside, the only source of light came from the PC, located on the table in the living room, and it was turned on most of the time, even during the nights that we would go to sleep early, basically right after sunset. One night, I was already in bed with the night lamp on, watching TikTok, when my boyfriend finally came in the room. Tired, we turned off the lights as he got into bed. I hugged him from behind as we said goodnight to one another, ready to switch off. However, something woke us up later that night. I checked the time and it was 4:40 AM. We remained silent, and I asked my boyfriend what was that. We listened. There it was again. 2 loud knocks. At first we looked at our window. Well, the curtains were closed, but you never know. Then as it got silent for a minute, we thought nothing of it and laid our heads back on our pillows. Then again, this time 3 knocks, on what now sounded like it was coming from outside the apartment door. We sat on the bed now, looking directly at the corridor. Then there was silence. My boyfriend stood up in boxers, quietly, slowly approaching the apartment door while I was still in bed. I watched him. He stood in the corridor facing the doors. Then he opened the front door quickly and looked through the little eye of the outside door. Nothing, he gestured to me using body language. We were afraid to make a noise. Who knows, what if there's a robber behind that door? When nothing happened and it was silent for a good minute, he returned to the bedroom and we went back to sleep. But nothing was over yet. Now we were both slightly concerned, questioning things, and then the knocks returned 5 minutes later. He heard them and without hesitation jumped out of bed. I did too. Now we both were annoyed. He grabbed a long metallic stick from the corner of our room and then silently approached the door in the corridor, while I stayed in the bedroom's doorway, standing slightly behind the wall, while trying to be as far away from the window as possible. From my perspective, I was scared that there could be something behind the curtains, like a human head or a figure. It's not hard to imagine some creep lurking just outside your bedroom window, especially when you're on the ground floor. So my boyfriend was standing there with a freaking metal stick in his hand, obviously on alarm, looking like he was ready to hit whatever is about to come through that door, as he was slowly about to reach for the door lock. And me, while I was in the bedroom watching it all, I too grabbed the first thing I could find, the night lamp from the stand, because I was scared for my boyfriend's safety, and I got ready to back him up from behind, just in case. And I signalled to my boyfriend to not unlock the door. He thankfully didn't do it, but once again, nothing except disturbing silence surrounded us. I could see my boyfriend getting pissed at this point, so he got back once again into the bedroom. I was still scared. I whispered, what was he doing? How could he go to sleep at such a time? What if that thing returns? And he whispered back to me to calm me down. There is nothing and no one there, probably just neighbours having fun. I listened to his logical thinking and tried to forget it. After all, we both needed some sleep. So I got into bed and closed my eyes. 30 minutes later, I heard a noise coming from the corridor. I instantly opened my eyes and whispered to my boyfriend, telling him to wake up. There is noise. But no luck, he was deep asleep, so I was alone on this. Shivers ran down my spine as I heard literal footsteps coming towards our room. I looked at the open doorway, still under my blanket, lying next to my man. I dared not to sit up, I couldn't. My boyfriend, before going to sleep for real, had turned on the lights in the corridor to make us both feel safer. We didn't care about the electricity bills, safety first. But the fact the corridor was all lit didn't help much, but the footsteps had stopped. I still had an uncomfortable feeling. I was still scared. It felt like someone was standing there, watching us. And I just laid there in bed with my eyes wide open, looking at the lit doorway. To be completely honest, my sixth sense told me that it was a man. The footsteps were loud and heavy. I watched the lit corridor for what felt like forever, till I finally felt somewhat safe. I no longer had the feeling of someone's presence. I still remembered that night. It was horrifying. Case 3 now, and we're heading over to Hawaii for a short encounter at a cemetery. This happened when I had just graduated high school back in 2017. I am Hawaiian, and every 4 years we have a family reunion back on Oahu, where many of my relatives live. This year we were camping at the base of one of the smaller mountains, near the town of Laie. About 200 meters away from where we were camping is a cemetery where many of my past relatives are buried. I'm not sure if this correlates with what I saw, but it definitely could. It was the early morning of the third day and I had just woken up to relieve myself in some nearby bushes. The time was about 5:30. The sun had just come up, enough for me to see without a flashlight. While I finished up my morning leak, I noticed something walking through the woods, roughly 30 to 40 meters in front of me. It was dressed all in white, but it had no features to specify gender or age. I rubbed my eyes and blinked a few times to see if I was imagining it, but I could tell it was a person with a long white cloak on, drifting with the wind from moving, but they took no steps. They made no noise, almost like they were hovering along peacefully. I watched it disappear out of view, and while I was never scared, it did spook me a bit, and I went back to my tent to get another hour of sleep. The whole sighting lasted about 20 to 30 seconds. The next morning I was sitting with my older family, telling them about the odd sighting that morning. They all looked at me with the same bright expression. "You saw a ghost, Zach?" Most likely one of our family members who came from the graveyard. Chills shot up my spine, as I'd never had an experience like that. Somehow I didn't even realise I'd saw a ghost, until they told me. Hawaii is a very spiritual place, and my family has loads of stories from their time on the island. I will try and learn about some next time I visit, and submit another email with their experiences. One last encounter tonight. If you've enjoyed these stories, then please consider subscribing so you don't miss out on the next installment of Night Drive Paranormal. This didn't happen to me, but to my mother. My parents used to own a 2-flat. We lived upstairs and my aunt, uncle and cousin lived downstairs. It was 1966 in Chicago, when my mum was pregnant with me, and my aunt with my cousin. My aunt had one sibling, a brother. We'll call him G. G was absolutely thrilled that his sister was pregnant. He couldn't wait to become an uncle and did everything he could to dote on his sister, as well as my mum, since he treated her like another sister, and they were pregnant at the same time. My dad, uncle and G used to work at the nearby steel mill. We lived so close that I remember seeing the occasional tiny bits of metal slag that would shimmer in the summer sun like glitter. Since we lived so close to the mill, it was easy for G to occasionally visit on his way home. A few days went by and G hadn't been by. My aunt was worried because G was a bachelor, and my aunt was his only sibling, so she knew it was going to be difficult for her to try and find him. She called cousins to ask if they could help search his home and neighbourhood. The police were called, but they had no luck either. About 2 weeks later, G's beaten body was found along some railroad tracks. He was missing his wallet and other items. The police called it a robbery and closed the case. No one was ever caught. Time went on, and my mum had me in December, and my aunt had my cousin the following year in March. One morning my mum was washing the morning dishes. My dad was at work and my older siblings were in school, while I, as an infant, was asleep in the bassinet in my parents' bedroom, which was right off the kitchen. The bedroom door was open, so my mum could easily hear if I woke up. My mum said she turned from the sink and saw G standing there. He was dressed in his work clothes and leaned casually against the door frame between my parents' bedroom and kitchen. He looked happy. My mum said she wasn't scared. In fact, she said it seemed normal to see him there. Nothing felt amiss. She said they spoke to each other in some type of telepathy. She spoke her thoughts to him in her mind, and she heard his responses the same way. She asked him what he was doing there, and he told her, "I came to see the babies." Then he told her that my cousin looked just like his dad, and that I looked just like her. As an aside, it's true, my cousin definitely favoured my uncle, while I resembled my mum the most out of my siblings. My mum asked G if he was hungry. Could she get him anything, but he said no, he had to go. She said something like, "Oh, okay," or whatever, and then took a glance at the sink behind her. And in just those few seconds of looking away, when she looked back to G, he was gone. My mum couldn't believe what happened at first. She said he had seemed so real, and it was only after he was gone that she realised that she'd never actually spoke words when talking to him, nor did he to her. She said she was amazed, but she also thought that since he had wanted to be an uncle so badly, it made sense that he figured a way to see the children that he missed. She never saw him again. That's all for tonight. I hope these tales have helped you relax on what I'm sure is going to be a long, dark drive tonight. This episode of Night Drive Paranormal wouldn't be possible without our incredible Patreon supporters. Tape Library Archivist, Exro, Umiko Grimm, Tyler Michael, Tracy Torello, Sandy Lusk, Restock1731, Mirror, Judith Hacker, Gabrielle, Eric Salas, Destiny M, Ash Loves Books, Alex O'Neill and Adeline. Our lead archivists, Danielle, Brian Barker and Alex Goldberg. And of course our grand overseers, Morning Rain 2619, Katie and Agent 355. Thank you all so much. If you want to check out the Patreon, then you can find a link in the description. As always, I hope you get home safe. Until next time.